Right, so we're going to start off with a match between ToldjaBoy and Tobi20. I picked this one partly because I wanted to show as many different decks and different players as possible over the course of the tournament, and I think ToldjaBoy had the best username in the tournament, which is definitely worth highlighting. Mad props to the person for thinking that up. Quality is good. If I get loud, I might peak a little. Alright, awesome. I'll turn it down a smidgen if that happens. So, this is Tobi20's deck list. It's a Cassava Swarm deck, I think, by the look on things. We've got a slight mix of abilities and influences here that provide the deck with a bunch of different combos and ways they can play. We have a lot of typical Swarm package stuff in that we've got Wraithling Swarm, Inkling Surge. These are cards that make Wraithlings very efficiently. We have Gore, which is another basically Swarm only card. There's a few Deathwatch cards in Shadow Watcher, Bloodtide Priestess, which is a 3-of. It's a very important card. Deepfire Devourer, which likes having lots of Wraithlings around. Get to the Undervault, which is paid off, which is payoff for stuff dying. And Shadow Dancer, which also again loves things trading and dying. I like the mix of all these. I like the triple Priestess, triple Dancer, but only 2 Shadow Watchers because that card is quite vulnerable. Any idea when the normal melee will be streamed by F8? Absolutely none, I'm afraid. But probably soon. I mean, for all I know, he might have done it already, but if so, it'll be on his YouTube channel. Supplementing all this, we have some removal. There's Demonic Lure, Sphere of Darkness, which is removal and cantrip to help smooth the consistency of the deck. Breath of the Unborn, which is an underrated AoE card. Shadow Nova, which I think is there to support the creep cards. There's a Dark Transformation and a Necrotic Sphere as one-ofs. And of course, Cassava's favourite, Stalwart, Punish. So there's tons and tons of removal, lots of answers for things. We've got Blood Tier Alchemist on top of all that. And there's even more in the sideboard, which we'll get to in a bit. Then we finally have some kind of tech cards and interesting choices. There's a Darkfire Sacrifice. There's a little creep package in Abyssal Juggernaut, Abyssal Crawler. There's Gate to the Undervault with a pair of Timekeepers to help power it out more quickly. And there's a Blood Echoes for, I think, mass death and resummoning. So looking at this list, this is clearly, like, there's some budget constraints here, which I understand, right? Swarm is very hard to do properly, air quotes, because a lot of the most important cards in a lot of Abyssian decks are legendary. It gets a lot easier with the nerf to Spectral Revenant, making it less essential, and allowing you to build a deck that's a little lower to the ground and more based on commons and rares like this one. The big things I feel are missing here, there's no healing outside of Shadow Dancer, who is quite hard to set up. It wouldn't be a terrible idea to include a Shadow Sister Kaleno if you have access to that, Toby, or even just some Azza Heralds to help you keep going. There's obviously extra copies of Gate to the Undervault would be nice, but I assume you don't have them yet. That's fine, no rush. The Creep package looks a little bit out of place. Like, most of this deck is Swarm, and although Cassava has a good removal option in Punish, playing Lilith with Ritual Banishing is pretty similar, basically the same. It's slightly less mana efficient, but it's much easier to set up when you've got a deck full of random Wraithlings. And that would let you get rid of the Juggernaut and the Crawler on the off chance they don't work out so well, and increase the consistency of your Deathwatch synergies and generally spamming the board. The other thing I'd like to see in here is some kind of payoff card for having lots of little creatures that doesn't necessarily involve them dying. And the biggest and cheapest one is Soul Shatter Pact. This card is very similar to the more commonly seen Deathfire Crescendo, except it's basic instead of legendary, which, you know, easy upgrade. And it has some advantages that DFC doesn't. It lets you make trades across your opponent's board with a bunch of Wraithlings, but it also lets you just push a ton of face damage and kill people out of nowhere. And it's a common component in like very fast Swarm lists, and I think would fit well here, as maybe a 2 copies of. Moving to the sideboard, we have what looks like a bunch of different removal spells. I think some of this looks a little unfocused. We've got Photic Drain, which is obviously there for healing. This card is okay. I think it fits better with Lilith, again, if you're going in that direction. Choking Tendrils. Oh, I can't even remember what that does. Choking Tendrils. I haven't played this card yet. Destroy an enemy minion on friendly Shadow Creep. Oh, that makes sense. So yeah, we've got Choking Tendrils and Deathmark for extra removal, which is probably not really necessary with the sheer amount of removal in the main deck. There's Phantasm, which is a nice card for minion versus minion games, where you're setting up, like maybe making a buffed up unit to trade with. But I think without rush units in the deck, it's a lot worse. Shadowstalk is a nice card that probably you could move to the main deck. It makes lots of extra wraith things. Again, I can see why you're not necessarily playing it in the main. I think that's a wise hedge against the minion light decks that are currently quite popular in the game. And Bound Tormentor I really like. That's a very nice addition, especially if people don't see it coming from the first game. They'll be like, oh, Sentinel, now what? And they won't have necessarily brought in efficient ways to deal with it. Which means you might get some value out of the card. And it's very powerful. Even if they play around it by playing a crappy minion, you can still replace it to draw a card. Toby's opponent is... That didn't work. ToldjaBoy playing Vath the Immortal. So this is clearly a version of the current popular Vath decks. We have... Actually, this was more minion focused looking at it. It's got more 2-drops. It's got Earthwalker and Bone Reaper for solid mid-rangey kind of threats. And there's only one finality, but there's 2 copies of Bounded Life Force that I assume were a budget replacement. We've still got Homeostatic Rebuke, Plasma Storm, Natural Selection, all the staples. We've got Earth Sphere as well, which is a good addition, especially with the reduced copies of finality. No artifact in this version, but we do have Grove Lion. Solid approval from me. And Grandmaster Kragon. No Flash Reincarnation in the main deck, but it is in the sideboard, which is quite an interesting choice. So looking at the exact minions, we have Biomimetic Hulk. I have tried this card briefly, and I found it more awkward than I expected, but it is very powerful when it goes off. Ephemeral Shroud, I really like a lot of the cards that... There's quite a few cards that are good against Vath, like minion-like decks, and they tend to be susceptible to Dispel, stuff like Concealing Shroud. Earthwalker, this card is not commonly seen. It is a good budget card. It can get out of hand very quickly if your opponent doesn't have an easy answer to it. Thunderhorn, yup. Lava Slasher, yup. Bone Reaper, this card is less popular right now, but it's still really, really good. It's a bit awkward against Sephiron. If you come up against someone running Grapnel Paradigm, they're going to make you very sad. But outside of that matchup, Bone Reaper is really powerful, and you can always bolt them out. Grove Lion is a fantastic mirror breaker. It's very difficult for an opponent trying to hit you in the face with their face to win the game at all if you have a Grove Lion in play, once you've worn them down from having lots of removal. And it's also good against Warbird, making it even better. Mercantor needs no explanation really, and Kragon I think is a good option to have. I think playing Kragon without Flash Reincarnation or Kujata is a bit of a tough call, so maybe I'd move him to the sideboard. But generally I like this list. This is... I think Earthwalkers should probably be Ragebinders. But I can see how having... Like, the nice thing about Earthwalker is that once you start your turn with it, it's a 4/4. It doesn't like to Plasma Storm anymore. So you can kind of curve one into the other, which is quite nice. But that's... Plasma Storm is also a bit awkward here with the triple Biomimetic Hulk, because that card takes a long time to come out. And Bone Reaper, I guess. In the sideboard, we have Flash Reincarnation. I'm not sure why this is in the sideboard. I think a big part of the strength of Magmar decks is being able to play Lava Slasher before turn 3. Basically, the earlier you can play Lava Slasher, the better. And so that's why people play Golem Metallurgist in... it doesn't otherwise do anything, but it just lets you play Lava Slasher on the cheap, and that's just such a powerful thing to do because it's probably the best card in the game. So I might be tempted to move the Flash to the main deck. Probably in this list, I'd look to cut at least a Plasma Storm, maybe put the Bone Reapers in the sideboard. Not sure about Kragon. You could probably shave an Ephemeral Shroud as well. Greatest Fortitude, I like that as... I presume that's against tempo decks, where they don't have that much removal, and being able to make a big minion that can chow through their stuff is pretty valuable. Say against Brome Swarm or something. So I like that. I think that's clever tech. Drogon is great. Again, I'm not sure why this isn't in the main. I guess maybe space concerns, but Drogon is really powerful. Like the typical Magmar lists do run Drogon Cryptographer because it's just such a like cheeky, easy way to win a game. Pandora, I like that. This is presumably for grindy matchups, so they have lots of removal, you have lots of removal. Bam, here's a Pandora, now deal with it. It does non-bow with your own Plasma Storms, but other than that, it's good. And then Blood Taurer, which is presumably against aggro as like a swing card for when you've both been trading a bunch of damage. I think that's a really cool idea. I'm not sure it's that useful with Earth Sphere and Saurian Finality. Like maybe a second Grove Line would be more reliable. But I do like the tech. I think that's a clever idea. So let's get rid of this. On to the game. So we can't see Tobi's hand yet. Sorry, wrong way around. Oh, I've loaded the same replay on both sides, haven't I? I'm so bad at this. Okay. Let me just really quickly get my... No, I haven't. I've done it right. So we can't see Tobi's hand yet. Tobi's on my other monitor. So I'm just going to, rather than trying to discuss both players' mulligans, it's easier for me to just talk about one, and then we'll see what the other person's hand is like when the game starts. So right here, we have, this is a very clunky hand. Bounded Life Force is definitely not a card you want to start on. I think it's a cool card, but it is very much, I'm going to cast this when it kills my opponent, or unless I absolutely have to like heal for 5. You know, Saurian Finality is a card you can cast on curve, and Bounded Life Force really isn't. So I definitely look to ship this. What else? I mean, there's 9 2-drops in the deck, so we probably want to mulligan 2 cards, because although Earthwalker, Thunderhorn, Lava Slasher, Finality is like an okay set of cards, we're against Abyssian. They have good removal. They have creatures that are annoying to deal with, like Ooze, or Abyssal Crawler that's far away. So we want to try and curve out on them if at all possible and get some tempo early on. Something like Barmimetic Hulk would be an ideal early draw because it's quite hard for them to remove without Bloodborne Spell, because they can't punish it, and Demonic Lure doesn't do anything. Outside of that, you probably do want to maintain a curve. Like if they're going to start trading with your stuff, I tend to assume Cassava is playing control when I queue up against her, so I would probably, although the Saurian will be good, I would probably ship it as well and just try and curve out with big threats. Hopefully you can play the Earthwalker and they're forced to remove it because it is a threatening card. Play the Thunderhorn and they're forced to remove it because it is a threatening card. Play Lava Slasher and kill something and now you have a big minion, and do they have another removal spell? So I think I would mulligan these two, looking for a 2-drop. Right, so I'm going to start the replays and they'll be slightly out of sync. I apologise for that, but hopefully they'll stay roughly lined up together, and if not I'll just pause them and adjust. Alright, so they are both going. I think it's just waiting for the players to make their mulligan decisions. There we go. So Tobi shipped Bounded Life Force and Lava Slasher, keeping Saurian as it's presumably a key part of the game plan. So this is fine. I mean, I don't know if I'd replace the selection, although I guess you're gonna... Like, you're not going to play Homeostatic Rebuke after Earthwalker and Thunderhorn, right? So I think I'd keep the selection there. So now we can see Tobi's hand. They've got Juggernaut Crawler, which is a nice setup. Although I don't think I'd play the Crawler in the middle. That's a very aggressive line that leads to the Varth just being able to kill it. Even though you get in some damage, it's not really worth it. Okay, so we've got like a Swarm early play here. I'm going to pause these so I can discuss the decisions both players made in a bit more with a bit more space. So, going back to Tobi's replace, not Tobi's, ToldjaBoy's replace, I am not a massive fan of replacing the natural selection there, because I think being able to use the selection to support a proactive line of Earthwalker into Thunderhorn is better than hoping they play, like not holding, than holding this or replacing this and hoping they play into Rebuke. Like I think if you're going to play the Rebuke, you probably want to replace the Earthwalker instead of the natural selection, because it's a good follow-up or insurance if your opponent kills, if your opponent plays something that doesn't die to it. Like Rebuke plus natural selection is quite a nice way to deal with anything your opponent does, or Rebuke into creature plus natural selection gives you insurance against basically multiple turns worth of your opponent deploying stuff. From Tobi's side, the Abyssal Crawler is quite a valuable card. If you leave it in play for a while, it will generate a ton of creep, ton of value, and that can translate into card advantage with the cards you have that rely on creep or that help creep, especially as you have the Juggernaut in your hand. And while the Abyssal Crawler is far away, it protects your larger units against natural selection. There's a Blood-Tide Priestess and an Abyssal Juggernaut in hand. Whereas here you're allowing ToldjaBoy to kill it for free, leaving you with just a couple of creep tiles. And yeah, they'll take some damage, but like, you know, Magmar have access to Earthsphere. We can assume they're going to heal. So I think I would probably play the Crawler further back. If you really want to get a mana tile, you can move here, play the Crawler in the corner or here or something, and play the Blood Tier Alchemist there. Your opponent can deploy to the mana tile to steal it from you, but they can do it here as well. And you're still in position to attack it with your Alchemist and Cassava, moving from this square to attack, say, this Earthwalker. The other thing is you could hold on to this because it helps you kill Ragebinder, but I don't know if that's worth it. With Blood-Tide Priestess in hand that you're probably going to try and play next turn. So let's continue. So the homeostatic Rebuke's got to be an option here. I think I would probably play the Earthwalker in a safe spot, probably above where Tobi currently is, and then move up and punch the Abyssal Crawler in the face. I think using the Rebuke there is like, it clears the board, but you're not actually really getting any further forward in the game. You're using a very valuable AoE card, and although you're kind of declaring an intention to take this mana tile, it's very easy for the opponent to deny it from you. Here we just have a Juggernaut. Oh, we have a Wraithling Swarm that Tobi drew. Fair enough. That seems okay. Let's just pause it again to talk through that. Oh, these these people are playing really quickly. I'm used to just, I wrote by every turn. I thought this would be easy. So, yeah, I think I like the Wraithling Swarm because it plays around natural selection. Although, oh, they replaced the Juggernaut. I would not have done that. I think dropping a 5/5 for 4 that promises to get larger is about as good as it gets, really. That makes a big statement. Like, your opponent has to answer it, or it's going to punch them in the face and grow, and it's going to make their life very difficult. So I would probably have looked to hold on to that, especially as you could... No, they drew they drew the thingy, Sphere of Darkness at end of turn, right? Yeah, I think spending your 4 mana on just playing a Juggernaut on this mana tile is absolutely fine. From ToldjaBoy's perspective, on the previous turn, I think I'd rather have the Earthwalker here and come up and punch the Abyssal Crawler, leaving the Blood Tier Alchemist alive. It doesn't do that much to have it in play. Alright, let's continue. So, ToldjaBoy here is now in a bit of an awkward position. They've got good cards against what's currently happening, but they take a while to set up and deploy. So I like this line. Thunderhorn on the mana tile and BBS. There's not much that they can do from here. The opponent can still like attack this Wraithling into it, ping it, attack face, but Tobi still has to come up with 1 more damage. Which I think they would get from the Sphere of Darkness. But this is really greedy. If one of the Wraithlings spawns here, the Thunderhorn can kill it. This line also gets all the Wraithlings dead. Oh, I guess that's just to trigger the Blood Tide. Okay, so this is a massive punish now that ToldjaBoy gets to make. So I'd have played the Blood Tide here, where it can't do that, and probably just keep these Wraith Things alive. Like, what you've basically done through this play is transported some Wraith Things from here to over there where they're not useful. So I would try and spread them out and keep them up front. Or even not spread them out. Like, if the Thunderhorn attacks them and they die, you still get them back, so that's not a problem. But yeah, now the Blood Tide's going to die, and that's a huge swing in the momentum of the game. Toldja doesn't have an amazing punish play. I would at least play the Earthwalker somewhere safer. Like, yeah, I like this move up here and play it, like, there. Okay. I guess the aggressive line's not too bad. So at this point, Tobi can ping and attack, but they do take more damage from this. Breath of the Unborn's a nice line here. That's a good draw. I like this. Good defensive play. Running away and deploying creep in order to maybe hopefully find that Juggernaut again. But Tobi's hand is looking very, very unfortunate at this point. Very thin on the ground. Toldja's on 24 and is full of resources. And they're just like massively ahead in this game right now. Tobi's on punish, deep fire devourer is not where you want to be. This is good. It'll die to the to a punish, but that's not a massive problem. At this point in Toldja's position, I would be looking to probably replace the natural selection. The homeostatic rebuke is a great counter to this. Blood Tide. The natural selection is probably not going to do a lot if Tobi's generating Wraith Things frequently. So I like this line from Tobi's side of things. Tobi draws Shadow Nova, which is pretty useless. Plasma Storm's fine. I think storming here is more inefficient than using homeostatic rebuke, and rebuke can kill bigger targets, so I think that's a good decision. I would still replace the natural selection though. Like, it's okay against the Juggernaut, but you have an answer to the Juggernaut. Gate of the Undervault coming down. Okay, well, this is a reward for not replacing that. That's for sure. So what do I know with my alternative play suggestion? This I really like. Grove Line coming down, the building destroyed, replacing the relatively low impact 2-drop. It's very hard for Tobi20 to win from this position. Oh, that's awkward for Tobi. They can kill the lion, which is fine, but trading resources just plays right into ToldjaBoy's hands. Because if all that happened for the rest of the game was one player played a unit and the other player killed it, Tobi is just going to win by a landslide because they've got the life lead that only snowballs every turn with the overload, increasing Varth's attack power repeatedly. This is all fine. I would Saurian here. Because the Saurian sets up lethal. Like, you waste some of the healing, but you don't need it, right? And instead you become 6 attack, put your opponent to 7, and then overload next and finishes it off. In fact, you can go overload and Saurian, put it to 6. So you get to beat a couple of points of heal as well. Doesn't look like it's going to massively affect the game, but, you know, it's important to note when you can speed up the clock significantly. As it is, it doesn't matter. Tobi is still within reach. And Saurian plus Overload can finish the game now. And Tobi's drawn Darkfire Sacrifice. Feels bad, man. So one of the big strengths of Lilith in a Swarm deck is that if you're trying to be proactive, right, like not play a control deck, like Cass often does, drawing... No! No, ToldjaBoy, no! You have lethal. Not drawing... Using Lilith means you can keep making something proactive. You can keep playing minions in situations like this, whereas as Cassiva, you can't really do anything. Like, if drawing the Darkfire Sacrifice, I mean, that's a dead draw anyway, but, like, even if you draw, like, yeah, Shadow Dancer is literally the best card in a Swarm deck, but it doesn't do anything. without Wraithlings in play, whereas Lilith can keep spamming Wraithlings every turn and at least get something done. For ToldjaBoy, so obviously it didn't affect the game too much, but what I would suspect happened there, obviously you didn't play the Saurian Finality, which would have killed your opponent. It's very easy to get stuck in traps of like thinking, oh, this card heals for 10. I should play it when I can heal for 10 and get value. And often you don't need to do that. You don't necessarily need to get full value out of all of your cards to win a match. In this particular case, it's like obvious in retrospect. Oh yeah, +2 attack, it kills her. I make mistakes like this all the time. It's a difficult thing to not wrap your head around. What's the right word? It's a difficult habit to work yourself out of trying to get like maximum effect out of all your cards, or assigning them mental roles of like, this heals me and stuns my opponent, as opposed to this deals 2 extra damage. Feels like a waste of a 7 mana card, you know? It's like Swarm with a few other bits splashed in and quite a lot of removal. So probably in this matchup, I would just look to bring in extra threats, especially Bound Tormentor, which is 2 extra threats. And you're playing against a deck with a lot of high value units that are amazing to steal. And against, in ToldjaBoy's deck, this is kind of a more unit heavy version of the typical Magmar decks we're seeing right now. Probably, since Toby showed so much removal in game 1, I would look to bring in Pandora. Not sure about the rest of this stuff, like probably Drogon, just to help with burst and racing the opponent down before, you know, putting face damage on a control deck and killing them before they can outvalue you is usually a good strategy. Right. Let's close that. So, looking at opening hands, we have ToldjaBoy's holding a very similar hand to last time, bit of an awkward curve. We have Mercantor, which is good against Swarm later on, can help kill a Blood-Tide Priestess. We have Rebuke, which is fantastic, also kills Blood-Tide Priestess among basically everything else in Toby's deck. Natural Selection, which I think is probably the replace here, but we could hold on to it, trying to go Homeostatic Rebuke into Walker plus Natural Selection. But I think trying to go, like, holding Earthwalker and Rebuke is awkward. Probably still worth it. Like, this is enough of a must-kill threat that you can expect your opponent to Demonic Lure it or something, so just casting this on curve and letting her use up a removal spell on what is essentially inconsequential in the long term is probably a good idea. From Toby's side, we can see they have another very lightweight, aggressive hand. I would probably want to go Wraithling Swarm plus Abyssal Crawler this turn, which shuts off a lot of removal, although it does play into Rebuke pretty hard, and sets up for potential Swarm payoff next turn. Of course, we don't even have the Swarm payoff. I would at least replace a Bloodseer Alchemist to try and find something. But turn 1, make a bunch of dudes. Turn 2, ping plus punish is quite a nice sequence to have the option of. And if Toldja doesn't have AoE, it probably works out pretty well. Especially if we can find the Blood Tide or a Shadow Dancer as payoff. So back to the game. So we're going to see Toby replacing the Earthwalker. I like that, I think. Just leaning on the Rebuke plan here. That's a bit of an awkward top deck on turn 2. Toby is going to spam out stuff. Are we going to see a Blood Tier here as well as the Abyssal Crawler? I think that might be a bit greedy. This is painful. I feel bad because Toby is now just going to get massively blown out by this Rebuke. Oh, I've turned real time off. That's a mistake. Hold on. There we go. Gives me a bit more time to talk. Boom. That is a very punishing play. Toby can't really do anything now. The Bound Tormentor is a very good pickup. I would not play it there, though. It will just die. I guess to some extent you're telegraphing the give a general -1 attack thing, but that's so inconsequential. No, Toldja, what are you doing? You don't need to do that. You can just kill it. I guess maybe they're playing around the give a general plus attack thing. I don't think the mana tile is worth using your natural selection like that. I think you're better off just buffing and killing it. Like, your opponent's low on cards already. You have a Lava Slasher into double Macantor. They could do basically anything at this point. It wouldn't matter very much. Tobi has... What have we got? The replay UI is rushing through. Punish? That is... I don't like that use of Punish. I think Punish has much higher value targets than that. I mean, just look at ToldjaBoy's hand. The Gore body blocking I do like, although Gore is infinitely worse than Sarlacc. And oh, that's painful. This is one of the problems with Gore. 4 additional damage. I think I would have played the Thunderhorn more aggressively if you just put it between Varth and Cass. It has the same result, but makes it harder for Cass to run away, so you're much more likely to get in the 4 damage next turn. Dropping Blood Tides. Oh, that's an interesting place to put it. The problem is the Thunderhorn can just walk backwards to here, and the Gore will stroll up and kill it. Or hit it, and then the Blood Tide will die. You do exactly the same thing again. Yeah. That's rough. Don't play Gore, kids. Gore is awful. If you want it, just craft Sarlaccs. I know they're expensive. No! No, Toldja, you don't need to do that. That's an odd line. I guess maybe they didn't spot the interaction. Like maybe they were expecting the Gore to go here. I don't think it can do that. I think it will always move 1 square if it can get away with moving 1 square. And then you could have played the Macantor over here to kill the Blood Tear and get in 4 face damage. Ouch. Rough. I think both of these games we've seen essentially the same thing happen. Tobi has made an overly aggressive turn 1, and they're not really being able to recover after Homeostatic Rebuke. And I think that's partly just a function of how Tobi's drawn. Like, they've drawn a lot of low curve cards and punishes and not much payoff. Although, no, actually that's a lie. They've drawn Blood Tides in each game. It's just been easy for ToldjaBoy to get rid of them in each time. I think Tobi is probably playing a little aggressively. I would... but the main thing that would help with this, like, you can play aggressive to defensively. This is still going to happen to a decent amount of the time. One thing I would look to play, if I was Tobi here, is just some card draw, like, as well as playing Lilith as the general who fits the strategy a little better. Tobi, if you have copies of Vellum Scry, I would really recommend adding some because it's very powerful and suits the deck perfectly. Yeah, nothing to see here. This is basically Toldja cleaning up. One thing of note, I would not have played the build unit all the way over there. By the time it actually comes alive, it's going to be pretty useless because we're taking the fight to Cassava. So, you know, maybe she can hit it and get some damage in on the 0-10, but like, who cares, realistically? It'll take a long time for it to actually die. And even if it does, you know, that's not a massive problem. This Breath is alright. Actually, it combos very well with the ping to kill both the Macantors, but unfortunately, it's too little too late for Tobi. Oh, and the Wraithing Swarm would make such a nice body block if the Thunderhorn wasn't still alive. I would play them here, like 1 down here, and then up 3, and that actually blocks the Varth. But obviously the Thunderhorn can kill one. Of note, any unit would have done it. The Thunderhorn is kind of icing on the cake, but any unit can move to here and attack this one and let Varth come through. Don't think I saw any sign. No, we saw the Bound Tormentor from Tobi. Okay, so that about wraps that up. So that is ToldjaBoy winning 2-0 over Tobi20 in round 1. Closing thoughts on that game. I think Tobi was definitely disadvantaged in that matchup, what with Toldja having 6 really well-positioned AoE clears, Plasma Storm and Homeostatic Rebuke, both of which kill more or less every single unit in Tobi's deck, which is pretty unlucky for Tobi, especially to run into in round 1. I think Toldja probably needed to be a little more aggressive with some of their lines, especially the Saurian Finality in game 1. And Tobi, I would have liked to see playing slightly less aggressively and ideally tweaking the deck a bit to take out some of the creep elements and focus harder on the Swarm. Play Lilith, play Vellum Scry, dig through your deck, spam out stuff, play Priestess, take over the game. Great. Vellum Scry and Soul Shatter Pact I think will smooth over a lot of the potential issues that a deck like that can have. And that's not Tobi's fault. Swarm decks are very hard to build. They look easy, but because so much of the gameplay relies on sticking minions, which is hard to do in an environment where there's so much good removal, especially against Magma like this, it just makes life really, really difficult for a Swarm player who hasn't built their deck like pitch perfect in order to be able to work through all that to just squeak out lethal. So, you're always going to be playing uphill against a player with 6 powerful AoEs in their deck when you're trying to play Swarm. But putting in card draw and ways to just go bam, gotcha, will help a lot.